We open today with the grim news of a stabbing terror attack which took place today at the Beit Kama Junction gas station in southern Israel. According to police, the terrorist, a man from Rafah, was neutralized at the scene by a passing IDF soldier. The attack took place in the Aroma Cafe at the gas station when a terrorist pulled out a knife and began attacking the customers. Defense Minister Gallant hinted that the IDF is getting closer to operating in the final Hamas stronghold in Rafah. Gallant was in Gaza City meeting top officers and checking operational plans in Gaza, including the dispersion of humanitarian aid to civilians. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
Defense Minister Gallant entered Gaza City along with forces from the IDF's 162nd Division. Gallant warned that those who think we are delaying the operation in Rafah will soon see that there is no place we cannot reach. Gallant added, "We will bring every single person involved in the October 7th massacre to justice. We will either kill them or try them in Israel. There is no place safe, not here, not outside Gaza, and not across the entire Middle East." Turning to the issue of humanitarian assistance, Gallant said that more aid strengthens the IDF grasp on Gaza and weakens Hamas.
הנושא ההומניטרי שיעמוד בקרוב על סדר היום סביב הנחיתה הצפויה של כלי שיט הוא נושא מרכזי על מנת לאפשר אספקה לאזרחים ולא לחמאס. כל מעשה כזה מחליש את החמאס, מחזק את האחיזה שלנו ומאפשר לנו להפוך את הקערה על ראשו של החמאס. אנחנו נמשיך ונבצע את זה כי זה מאפשר מבצעי על מנת להשלים את המשימה שלנו.
Humanitarian aid is arriving in Gaza by land, air, and sea. A temporary pier is being erected on the northern Gaza coast to receive shipments arriving from Cyprus. Airdrops are continuing into northern Gaza, where aid agencies say the needs are greatest. For the time being, ground operations remain focused in the Hamad Town residential complex in southern Gaza's Khan Yunis, where the IDF's 98th Division has killed more than 100 Hamas operatives in over the past week and a half. Troops have been raiding the multi-story building in the Qatari-funded neighborhood, where the IDF says there is Hamas infrastructure. Some 100 airstrikes were carried out during the operation in Hamad. The division's Madlan and Egoz commando units, along with the Givati recon unit, captured several operatives in Hamad, including a commander in Hamas's elite Nukba force. Captured operatives provided the IDF intelligence on the locations of tunnels, booby traps, gunmen, and other infrastructure. In one case, captured Hamas fighters provided information on a building where 15 gunmen were holed up. The site was then struck and the operatives killed.
The U.S. would be reportedly willing to support pinpoint Israeli raids targeting senior Hamas leaders in and under Rafah. But the report in Politico also says the U.S. is opposed to a large-scale IDF operation in the city. ILTV's Devo Klein has more.
U.S. President Joe Biden and other senior U.S. officials have expressed opposition to an IDF operation in Rafah unless the estimated 1.4 million civilians in the city can be safely evacuated. U.S. officials have requested that Israel provide clear plans ensuring this will happen. According to Politico, the U.S. would be willing to support pinpoint Israeli raids targeting senior Hamas leaders in and under Rafah, but not a large-scale invasion of the city. Israeli officials, including Prime Minister Netanyahu, have insisted repeatedly that an operation to destroy remaining Hamas brigades in Rafah is the only way to win the war and take down Hamas. Speaking after a reported IDF strike on an UNRWA facility, Blinken said protecting civilians must be Israel's #1 priority.
The Israeli military, the Israeli government have a responsibility and an obligation to do everything possible to ensure that the humanitarians can do their jobs. And among other things, that means making sure that if there's a humanitarian facility that's clearly identified, it's not struck. It means making sure that if there's a supply mission, a convoy, trucks going to a particular place at a particular time, that the Israeli military does everything possible to ensure its secure passage.
Israeli officials insist that Israel is making extraordinary efforts to cooperate with international humanitarian efforts and blames UN agencies and Hamas with preventing the aid from reaching civilians.
Israel's mission in what pertains to the humanitarian aid to the Palestinian civilians is one. We inspect the trucks coming in, and we have excess capacity to inspect those trucks coming in. Whenever there's a backlog of humanitarian aid waiting to be distributed, it's on the Gazan side of the border. And we saw that by relying on certain UN bodies, so to say, the mechanism hasn't been functioning, hasn't been working as it should, because they were reliant on Hamas.
Well, joining us today to comment on the state of U.S.-Israel relations, we have former U.S. Ambassador to Israel, David Friedman. Ambassador Friedman, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Emily. Great to be with you.
To start, I'd love to get your take on the recent comments of President Biden towards Prime Minister Netanyahu. Would you say the U.S. support for Israel is wavering?
It sure looks that way. I think the comments by America's greatest friend in the middle of a war when Israel's fighting for its life, these comments by the president that try to draw a dichotomy between the Israeli people and the Israeli leadership, I think it's highly political. I think it's an attempt to score points in places like Michigan, where Biden needs to get a lot of Arab voters, and I think he's trying to, make the case that he loves Israel, but that he doesn't like Netanyahu, and so, somehow by threading that needle, he scores some political points. The problem with it is this: Israel's in the middle of a war. The prime minister right now is Benjamin Netanyahu. He is fighting the war. The country, as far as I can tell, has rallied behind him around 80% or so in terms of their approval of how he's handling the war. What happens in the future when there's elections, who's going to win, what the polls say, things could change, but that's not the circumstances now. The circumstances now are Israel's fighting a war, and what America should be doing is showing absolutely no daylight between itself and Israel's elected leaders. And by doing that, and here's the real problem, Emily, by doing that, by showing that daylight, you're playing into the hands of Hamas, because Hamas sees that daylight, and they think to themselves, you know what? We may not be wiped out. We may actually be able to survive this. We may get a break at Rafah. We may be able to keep 2 or 3 battalions. We may be able to keep our lives. We may be able to keep some of our money, because Biden is going to shut Israel down. And that raises the price for all the negotiations. It makes it harder to recover the hostages. It makes it harder to achieve a ceasefire. So I really think Biden's doing exactly the wrong thing with regard to this approach.
It seems that the Biden administration has continued to call for Israel to exercise caution and to make humanitarian guarantees when Israel is already doing so. So why is there this disconnect? If it's just political posturing, as you alluded to, on the part of the Biden administration, is it pandering to more anti-Israel voices?
No, I think that's it. I mean, look, they meet often, they speak often, the governments know each other. They know that Israel, both because of its sense of morality and because it's just not helpful for Israel to, incur the wrath of the world. Israel's doing all it can to avoid civilian casualties. And, the statistics comparing this war to others, I won't bore you with the numbers, but it bears that out. Israel's doing a very good job of trying to avoid casualties. The problem is, all it takes is 1 or 2 pictures of a starving child or a dead body. As you know, some of these pictures are staged, and the dead bodies all of a sudden start moving as soon as the camera's off. But whatever it is, I mean, assuming, as I do, that there are, civilian casualties of some significance, nonetheless, that is what happens in a war. And the quicker Israel is able to complete this war, to annihilate Hamas, the quicker, we'll get back to a rebuilding program. What Biden is doing is he's prolonging the misery by creating this duality, this sense that somehow Israel needs to slow down on the war, needs to get into some ceasefire, which will only enable Hamas to regroup and to rearm. And it'll just prolong the misery of everybody on both sides. But as you say, he's doing it for politics, because he has to show to his base, to the far left base that he relies on to get elected in November, he has to show that he's doing more for the Palestinians. And this is all just kind of political trickery. It will have no substantive benefit to anyone there, Israeli or Arab, but it's how the political game is played.
Now, the U.S. just signed the Iran sanctions waiver again, effectively unlocking $10 billion to the Islamic Republic. Do you think that this U.S. administration sees the connection between Israel's fight with Hamas and the threats to the U.S. from regimes like the Islamic Republic? Are they doing enough to deter the threat from this regime and its terror proxies?
No, they're committing diplomatic malpractice every single day. Providing Iran with funding of any kind, whether it's in the form of sanctions, relief, or otherwise, is absolute madness. I mean, I don't know anyone that thinks this is a good idea. I don't understand the benefits to America. I think funding Iran, which is, I would say, the key difference between the Biden administration and the Trump administration, right? The Trump administration, the sanctions that we imposed were massive. We eliminated Qasem Soleimani, and Iran was broke. And in the Biden administration, Iran has become a very wealthy nation, and they're getting richer and richer. And what are they doing with that money? You know, they're not building hospitals, they're not building schools. They're building, hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles. They're enriching uranium. They're funding Hamas and Hezbollah and the Houthis. And for America to be funding this is absolute madness. By the way, what it also is doing, it's enabling Iran to sell oil to Russia. So it's actually making it harder for America to help Ukraine win that war as well. So America's foreign policy is adrift. It's self-defeating, and there are stark differences between what's happening now and what happened during the Trump administration.
All right, well, we are out of time, but I want to thank you, Ambassador Friedman, for taking the time to talk to us, and let's hope the Biden administration heeds your warning and changes course. Thank you, Ambassador Friedman.
Thank you, Emily. My pleasure.
Experience the power of truth with ILTV News. If you're looking for quality content and captivating visuals, join our news community and become an integral part of our team as we embark on a mission to unveil the real Israel, dismantling the web of lies and misinformation that surround reporting on Israel. By subscribing to ILTV News, you will not only have access to the latest updates, but you will also amplify our message, creating a ripple effect that carries the truth far and wide. Subscribe today and help reshape the narrative. Available on the web, Android, and Apple. The Knesset passed an amended wartime budget. Voting along strictly partisan lines, lawmakers approved $19 billion in extra spending on the military and civilian sectors most impacted by the war. More from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
After 2 days of raucous debate, the Knesset voted along partisan lines, passing the revised budget to reflect the impact of the war.
62 בעד 55 נגד. אני קובע כי הצעת חוק תקציב נוסף לשנת הכספים 2024, התשפ"ד 2024, התקבלה בקריאה השנייה והשלישית ותיכנס לספר החוקים.
Prime Minister Netanyahu's ruling Likud party and coalition leaders welcomed the vote, saying the budget guarantees the continuation of the war until complete victory.
להיות תקציב טוב עם 4 מטרות: תמיכה במאמצי המלחמה עד הניצחון בעזרת השם, דאגה למילואימניקים שלנו שנמצאים במרכז בתקציב הזה, חיזוק העורף, כי אנחנו צריכים עורף חזק כדי לגבות את החזית ואת הניצחון, ולהבטיח המשך צמיחה מואצת של המשק הישראלי ושל הכלכלה הישראלית בתוך ומייד אחרי המלחמה.
Opposition leader Lapid had a different view, calling it the most sectoral and detached budget in the history of the State of Israel. The revised budget places the government expenditure limit for 2024 at 584 billion shekels, or $160 billion, more than 70 billion shekels, or $19 billion, higher than the original 2024 budget approved prior to the outbreak of the war on October 7th. 55 billion of the additional 70 billion is allocated to financing the military, while the rest will go towards civilian wartime needs.
The U.S. House of Representatives is in the process of passing a bill that could lead to the ban of social media platform TikTok in the U.S. Let's take a closer look at the full story.
A new bipartisan bill that would require TikTok's parent company, ByteDance, to sell to a non-Chinese government-affiliated ownership has passed by an overwhelming majority in U.S. Congress. The bill would give ByteDance 6 months to sell before being shut down in the U.S. This legislation comes amidst concerns that the Chinese Communist Party is using TikTok to manipulate public opinion in recent studies that indicate they are doing just that. Chinese companies are also subject to a national security law requiring them to share data with the government on request, prompting justified concerns over data privacy. In response, ByteDance has taken to social media themselves to call on users to lobby Congress against the bill. In order to comply with the bill, ByteDance would have to seek approval from Chinese officials to complete a forced diverture, which China has vowed to oppose. For U.S. lawmakers, this alone proves the necessity of removing the platform from the hands of a hostile foreign adversary. White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre stated that the bill ensures the platforms with the ability to manipulate public opinion wouldn't be in the hands of those who can exploit them.
Well, as Israel faces lawfare in international bodies such as the International Court of Justice, the World Jewish Congress is bringing a delegation of 14 U.S. federal judges to learn more about the legality of Israel's conduct in this operation. Let's take a closer look at the work of World Jewish Congress on this historic legal delegation.
Earlier this week, the World Jewish Congress facilitated a significant educational mission, bringing a delegation of 14 federal judges from the U.S. to Israel.
It was important for me to be here, to be part of this educational experience, and specifically to bear witness to the atrocities of October 7th. Most of us are community leaders back home, and I think it is really important that we're here with our own eyes and our own ears, seeing the horrors that happen, hearing the story, hearing the trauma that people have, so we can bring that information back to the United States.
The mission provided a crucial opportunity for direct interaction with Israeli legal experts and stakeholders, and these judges were interested in gaining a better understanding of the impact of the October 7th attacks and the subsequent response of Israel's legal system. This visit held special significance as Israel continues to fight consistent backlash and criticism worldwide.
I think it's just really important to understand what people all around the world go through, to understand the problems that people have. I think it's important to see what happened here, to understand what happened here, and more importantly, to see how Israelis have banded together and have united against a common foe in an attempt to try to defend themselves. The other thing is, quite frankly, this trip has taught me, I went and saw Masada on Saturday, how many times the Jewish people have been attacked, how many times they've had to defend their own freedoms, and how resolute the Jewish people and certainly Israelis are in the face of adversity.
I think it's helpful for influential, legal scholars to have a fulsome understanding of what Israel is dealing with. Will it have some impact on kind of the broader legal community when we go home? I hope so. I hope people will bring their stories back of what they've seen here and kind of report that back in an accurate and faithful way to what they've seen.
The judge's visit included a powerful and moving itinerary, including a guided visit to Yad Vashem and a memorial at Mount Herzl, the cemetery for fallen soldiers. These visits were especially poignant in the wake of October 7th, and as Israel continues their fight against Hamas.
I think what has stuck out to me so far is our visit to Yad Vashem. I've been there a couple of times, but every time is just as hard, and it's really an understanding of what happens if good people don't stand up to bad people. And the way I really think about it is in terms of anti-Semitism at home in the United States, and that the real fear is that the great majority will just not so much go along, but not stand in the way. And that's something we all have to worry about, because things can get very bad very, very quickly.
Not only an insightful visit, but also an inspiring one, as the judges left Israel with a greater understanding of the importance of a Jewish state and were reminded that we must never bow down to evil.
My message here, especially having been at Yad Vashem today, is how important it is for us to remember our history, to remember that this is the ancestral home of the Jewish people, and that after October the 7th of 2023 and the horrors of that massacre, that it is important for us to understand that the Jewish people, for the first time ever, have the right to fight back, to stand up for themselves, and for the first time in the last 2,000 years to say that we will never go back to Babi Yar, that we will never go back to Auschwitz, that we will never go back to at Dachau and Treblinka, because we Jews and we Zionists in the world, we won't be voiceless victims again. We will stand up for ourselves with reprisals that deter aggression, the way people are now standing up for themselves in the state of Israel. And that's what Zionism means. Zionism means being an equal people among the nations of the earth.
The righteous amongst the nations who risk their lives to save Jews from persecution and death.
And here to speak with us about this incredibly moving delegation of federal judges visiting Israel is Sarah Friedman, Chief Marketing Officer of the World Jewish Congress. Let's jump right in. Sarah, why was it important to bring this delegation to Israel now?
At this time when Israel is facing so much in the court of public opinion and in the courts around the world, it's so important for people who understand the judicial system, who understand the laws of war, to come here, see for themselves, fact find, make the decision on their own about what Israel is doing, how Israel is doing the best, the most that they can to prevent any loss of lives, to prevent any harm to civilians, and to really fight a just war.
And what has been planned for this organization on the visit?
The group has started in Yad Vashem to commemorate and remember the 6 million who've lost their lives for being Jewish and what anti-Semitism can bring. We have come here to the Hall of Remembrance on Mount Herzl for them to pay tribute to the soldiers who've lost their lives in past wars and currently. We will go to the south. We will commemorate and see the sites of the October 7 massacre. And we will learn in the IDF, from the IDF military department, on legal actions that are taken and what is done to prevent loss of lives and humanitarian aid.
Now, what message is the World Jewish Congress trying to send with this delegation?
The World Jewish Congress is sending a message by bringing these groups that we are supporting the state of Israel, that we are on the side of right, that we are protecting the Jewish people around the world by fighting anti-Semitic tropes of misinformation about Israel, about the Jewish people. And by bringing these groups here and showing them the truth about what is going on, it's the best diplomacy we can do.
Tell me a little bit about the other delegations that you've brought to Israel. What impact do you see these visits having on them?
Since October 7, the World Jewish Congress has been bringing missions of influential people of all ages, of all different spheres of influence from around the world to come bear witness, to be the testimony for the people of Israel, to show the world that Israel, our largest Jewish community around the world, is suffering, and that we are fighting for our survival, for the survival of Jewish people around the world, and for what is good and right.
Sarah, I couldn't help but notice that something moved you. Is there specifically something being here that touched you, or what are you feeling yourself?
I think being here, I've been here a number of times, actually, even before it opened, but officially opened. Being here is always moving. It's always extremely emotional. But I remember being here a couple years ago, or even a couple months ago, and just looking at the empty bricks on the wall. And I think just knowing how many were filled recently is something that it's just shattering.
Absolutely, Sarah. Thank you for joining us today and for sharing about this important delegation. And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Partly cloudy skies are expected tonight around the country with lows of about 11 degrees Celsius or 52 degrees Fahrenheit. Then tomorrow, light rain is expected in the north with cloudy skies in the south and steady temperatures set to reach highs of 20 degrees Celsius or 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures should stay consistent over the weekend. That's all for today's news. For more updates from Israel on all your devices, check out our ILTV channels, subscribe to our ILTV newsletter, and don't forget to check out our new and improved website, ILTV.tv, with all the latest news from the heart of the State of Israel. I'm Emily Schrader. Be well, and thank you so much for watching.